My name is Brittany Rose. I'm co-founder of Women in Real Estate. I'm also a real estate agent, capital raiser, and I prefer not to be a developer. Honestly, I prefer to partner with great developers because I'm a true believer in like you're good at what you're good at. I'm not good. I won't say I'm not good. I don't want to manage construction. I don't want to manage, and we just talked about this a little bit, but men, I don't want to manage men in construction, right? It's not my calling. Project management is not my calling. So my suggestion is always figure out what your calling is. And we have two very capable, knowledgeable industry professionals who have different skill sets. And it's all about collaboration. It's all about figuring out what you can bring to the table and then finding the people who bring a different skill set that can help you really make the dream come true. So I'm going to let these gentlemen introduce themselves. Michael, let's start with you.
No, thanks. My name is Michael Carpenter. I am a real estate agent and a podcaster, content creator. Shameless plug. Our podcast, the Blueprint Podcast, up there on the screen. If you want more information about investing, specifically Duplex, we just launched a Duplex Diary series, and we've been interviewing current owners, builders, and just getting their experience. And so we actually just dropped episode today for a guy. And so it's kind of a great add-on to what you'll hear today, just more education and experience. And so, I'm excited to be here. So this is my listing. And so we wanted to create an opportunity just to educate people on the duplex market, give them an opportunity to kind of just really see something and also be educated at the same time, and hopefully inspire people to either purchase, get more education, or pick the side that makes the most sense for you in terms of your real estate investment journey. So excited to partner with Brittany on this. And then Gilbert's obviously a client. And we actually shot an episode here 9 months ago in this similar style. And it was really impactful. A lot of people got a lot of value out of it. So excited that we're getting to run it back almost a year to date to when we did it last time. So it's kind of cool, full circle to be in this unit again. So.
Perfect. Gilbert?
Yeah, I'll start. Gilbert O'Karrampo, president of Grace Building Company. We're a local Houston-based development company. We started in 2015, 2016. Our niche was specifically duplexes. And in this subdivision, specifically, Sunnyside Gardens is where we started. And just to give you guys a background of why we picked here. So my wife is a third generation Sunnyside native. Her dad was born and raised here. Him and Melanie Lawson were the first Black students to go to Mount Carmel, which I think is now closed. And so her grandmother is also from here. And so while we were dating, we always would kind of drive around the neighborhood, and we noticed that there was just so many vacant lots and so many just distress here. So we started a company specifically focused on building duplexes. And so we also are landlords here too. So I think that's an important piece. I know we'll talk about that a little bit. I know people like to throw around that term generational wealth. And so what does that really look like? We can't really talk about that without long-term ownership, especially in the communities where we thrive and come from. So I'm thankful to Brittany and Mike for this opportunity, and also all of you. It's a chance to network too. I know I need to do a better job of it. I don't get out as much. Some of you may understand I have kids, so I'm always ripping and running with their activities now. So I started late in life with the kids thing. So I'm, kind of sorting that out, but glad to be here.
Before we move on too much, I want to also shout out Andrea Fowler. She's one of our sponsors for the event. So if you want to introduce yourself real quick as well.
Rate mortgage, which previously was guaranteed rate, but nobody could spell guaranteed. So, but I've been in this industry for 24 years. I was raised in the third ward. So I have, and in fact, I'm third generation, third ward native. Have very deep ties to that area still to this day. Probably one of my favorite areas of Houston, actually, because the homes are just still so beautiful. I mean, we talked a little bit about that earlier, but I'm here to, answer questions about how much to have, what do you need, where things are, what I see, what can work.
Perfect. And we're going to do a Q&A with Andrea in a little bit as well. So if you have lender-specific questions, make sure you write them down just in case. I forget questions, which is why I have this here. So make sure you write down yours as well. So I want to start with just entering the market. Right now, our market is very unique. It has been for the last several years. How do you recommend people get started, either as owner-occupied, folks or as investors? What does that look like for a regular person?
Well, for a regular person, and I think we're all regular people, what that looks like is number one, anytime, especially if you're talking about owner occupancy, the loans, right, that are available to you. You have FHA, you have VA, you have 5% down conventional products. And I think that's so important because one, it gives you the access to be able to buy, right? Especially now, people like to say we have high interest rates. We really don't have high interest rates. They're just higher than what we've seen over the last 5 years. So, our debt service is a little bit more challenged. So now more than ever, it's important that you get with industry professionals like Brittany, like Mike, like many of you guys out here, so they can share the data and information that might not be readily available to the market. One of the things I like to use personally when I underwrite my deals, I think a lot of other people should, especially with new duplexes, they're really, zip code specific, right? There are a lot of duplexes going up and around, but one thing you really want to focus on, especially from the long-term ownership aspect of it, is the median rents in these duplexes. Because why that's so important is because, and these are my numbers I use, like 10 to 15% plus or minus. Like once you start going 15% over what the median rents are in the duplexes, you're really entering a space and a range where it may be tough for you to sustain having a tenant in place. It's one thing to get a tenant in place that pays $25, $26, $27, $2,800. Let's be honest, how long are you going to keep that tenant in place? Even me, I'm here. I can come before you guys and admit I've gotten tenants that paid what looked like a large amount, but the sustainability of that isn't really viable, especially in today's time. So you really want to be wary of where you are in those numbers. Like you always need to be sure to understand what the typical or median tenant in this area is going to pay for rent. That's going to be one of the first things you have to understand as a buyer and also as a developer.
I think that's really important, especially because if it's not sustainable, then you're looking at a higher vacancy rate,
Yep.
and that can quickly wipe out the profits that you've made. So tell us what kind of rental rates you're seeing in this area, and then also you do something really unique with your homes. Before you're selling it to your end buyer, you're oftentimes fully furnishing it and placing a tenant. So tell us about that and why you do that and why other people need to start doing that.
Well, the reason why we did that when we first started, I don't come from a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of money. So what we wanted to do is when we got into these construction loans, you want to really shorten the time frame that you're paying this high interest obligation. And so as soon as we got done with duplexes, one of the things we were doing when we first started, especially here, we would put a tenant in place. This was before Airbnb really became popular in Houston. This was 2016, 2017. So, we used a lot of different lending products, conventional banks, hard money, private money, but we always found that, man, there was always a demand. So we were able to get tenants in. And so when you're looking to sell duplexes, 9 out of 10, especially for owner occupancy, who are you dealing with? A lot of first-time landlords, first-time homeowners. And so that learning curve for them can be intimidating, having to find a vetted tenant, day one. I mean, it can really be a process, but because we took that step away from them, we put these tenants in place and we found that it was an easier sell for us too, especially with the owner occupants, because they appreciated getting into a duplex, having a day one tenant. And then not only that, but on the HUD statement, aside from builder concessions and everything, they're going to get prorated rents back and potentially the deposits back. So that's huge for a first-time buyer. It helps them limit the number of, the number of dollars they have to come to the table with. And so for us as a duplex operator ourselves too, once we got done with construction, hitting the ground running was huge, right? And so we had the limit and only put one tenant per unit because we wanted the viability of the FHA loan program around for them. But then some investors mentioned, hey, if you fill both units, we'll buy it. So we kind of learned to, in some cases, we can put 2 tenants in. And that also helped kind of expand who we could sell to, because you guys are pretty familiar with it. A lot of you realtors that are in here. Houston is a destination city. And I like to keep reminding people of that because, even me, I got to Houston in 98. I grew up in New Orleans and moved here for college. And I just noticed over time, like a lot of people that are here in Houston, they didn't come here, but professionally they work here. So the housing demand is in Houston. And even if you look at data that's out there right now and available, there are more and more people coming into Houston. So it's always going to be a viable market for duplexes. I know there's a sentiment that duplexes are saturated, But from a rental perspective, there's a strong market for renters, right? So that's something that's still in place now. And so that's kind of the niche we created. We would, have the turnkey product ready for clients. We still do it to this day. Here recently in the last 3 months, we sold 3 duplexes. All three of them, literally all three of them had tenants in them. So the first one we sold was on Bataan. That one had a little bit of a higher price point. So it was sold to a California investor, a husband and wife. They put 25% down. They own it. Both units were furnished already. So they liked that process. In fact, that they could, boom, jump into it and start debt servicing it as soon as they got in. And then 2 more recently on Mallow, it was the mother and son. They bought 2 duplexes. Mom bought the duplex in the front. Son bought the duplex in the back. And so that was both of their first investment purchases. So really happy for them. And they like the fact that they were turnkey ready day one. At the closing table, they got money pushed over to them, right? And then they had tenants that we vetted already. And that's another important thing. We like to kind of match tenant types in duplexes. So if you have a married couple on one side or a small family, we like to kind of keep that consistent, and they appreciated that fact. So all their tenants are still there, a block over, 4901 and 49. Just sold those recently, still in community with them too. So that's another thing, right? You get to build relationships. I think sometimes in this business, we get too focused on the transaction. But what I've seen has kind of helped me, and just having a sales background too, is that one customer you can keep for a lifetime, and you can form a relationship with them and monetize them several times over the span of a life cycle versus being too focused on the transaction, right? So all these buyers, we still keep in touch with them, still keep in community with them. And that also kind of helps me as an investor in this neighborhood, because I get to hear from them what's happening in their properties, and I get to collaborate with them and share with them. So a lot of times you'll get data that's lagging. It's like 3-6 months behind. We know what's happening in real time. We really know what's going on, what the pulse of people is. Admittedly, I'll admit to all of y'all right now, is not the greatest economic time for a lot of people, right? A lot of people are kind of hurt and struggling right now. Even the times right now, it's been tough on relationships. A lot of people are getting divorced and splitting up, going each way. And so we need to be a little bit more sensitive about that too, because, anytime you're an investor in an area, you need to keep a pulse and keep an idea of what's happening so you know how to adjust if those adjustments are necessary.
I think I want to add to that in terms of the strategy that you haven't touched on is running the short-term rental play. So the financing that you have is really important to being able to do that. There's a lot of folks doing that, purchasing an FHA, not living in the home, and we'll definitely talk more about that later. That's probably the wrong way to do it. But if you're doing it the right way, you have a conventional loan, you are set up in a way where you can, maybe have a long-term tenant on one side and Airbnb on the other, like this. That's literally what this setup is for this property. The ability to market to short-term rental guests, I think, is really impactful when you're thinking about a real estate business at large, right? So maybe you do have a larger portfolio. You do have people who are coming in. Maybe they're staying at your Airbnb looking about where they want to stay in the city. So being able to connect with those people, being able to guide them to maybe your other products. If you're a realtor, obviously being able to pick up clients that way. So I think being able to have multiple business models out of one unit, I think also just gives you a better foundation too. So obviously that depends on kind of your long-term strategy, what your financing needs to be. Obviously short-term rentals do fluctuate, right? So it might be a month where you're hitting 5-6K, and then there might be a month where you're 2 or 3K, right? And you really can't necessarily always control that. You can do better marketing. So that does offset costs for some people who treat their Airbnb like a business and not like a little side hustle. If you really treat it like a business and you got your marketing and you got efficiencies, operations, good customer service, you're going to be more stabilized. And so that's what this product, particularly and what Gilbert's doing, that's what is being offered. But I think there's another element that I wanted to add that he hadn't already touched on.
I want to talk a little bit about tenants, because I think the realtors in the room will appreciate the information so that they can make the best offer to their potential clients. But also, if you own a duplex and you're now looking at filling it with a tenant because you didn't work with Gilbert, and so now you have to go figure out your own tenant. Talk to us about your vetting process and what that looks like and what are the best practices. And then I want you to talk about what that looks like from a realtor perspective and how you're able to assist with that vetting process.
Yeah, so honestly, I mean, you definitely want to vet all of your tenants, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because once you become a property owner, you are now liable, whether it's your fault or not, for things that happen at your property. I can share a lot of stories I learned that happened negatively to me when I didn't vet properly, right? Unfortunately, you can expose people to things that, they're not prepared for. So you definitely always want to do criminal background checks, right? Especially in these economic times, I'm not so sensitive around credit checks necessarily. A lot of people, they often feel like, man, my credit isn't good. I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like, a lot of people right now, they're just looking to see if you have an eviction, a recent eviction. Landlords are becoming a little even bit more lenient because, to be honest with you, we have a lot more pressure on us nowadays more than ever. So you don't necessarily want to disqualify someone just based on their credit score alone because, we've all been through tough times. We all have had our challenges. So we're never just judging someone solely on the credit score. I have tenants that have credit scores in the 4s and 5s, but they pay their rent every month. So I have some tenants, honestly, too, with suspended licenses. They're afraid to go get a license, but you know what? They pay their rent every month. So there are definitely different sources you can use to vet tenants. And, we also like to do referral systems as well. Oftentimes, if you get a tenant that's good and they pay their rent, oftentimes they may have a family member or a friend they know that's working just as hard. And so you can incentivize your tenant to refer someone to you. That's been great for us as well. Some of the best tenants I've ever gotten have been referrals from other people. So I know I have this one tenant, Instagram famous dude. I won't mention him, but him and his girl, they have never missed a rent payment. They pay every month on the first. And then they've created a pretty good referral system for us too, where they refer some of their friends, and that's helped as well. So you just want to really hone in on that property management side of it when it comes to vetting tenants, because they can tell you pretty good story of, who they are and what they are. Me too, personally, this is me. I like to keep families together. That's something I do too. I know a lot of times you run into cases where, for lack of better terms, they don't want someone there, like by the book necessarily. But me, I like to keep families together. So I try to do that in situations where I can and where it's safe for everybody. So that's definitely something you just want to push out to your clients. It's not for them to be so hung up on credit scores, especially now. Let's be honest, it's 2025. A lot of people's credit cards are maxed out. Money isn't spending the same way it used to spend 2020. And that's impacting everyone. No one is, I'm part of an investor group. We're hearing horror stories. Investors are getting foreclosed now. So, I mean, it's just a real thing it's just different times today. So we need to be able to adapt and also know who a tenant or prospective tenant is beyond just a credit score.
I think I would add, this is a note for the realtors. Do y'all use the Forewarn app on HAR? Anybody using that? So you can do a quick background check and just get some high-level information on somebody. It's in your HAR portal. If you need help finding it, I can show you afterward. I use that. I even use that for showings. So obviously I'm a male, so I don't necessarily have some of the concerns, but obviously being a female realtor and there's a lot of women in the room, if you're going on a showing with a man and you don't know him, like look him up on Forewarn real quick. Yeah, Forewarn, Forewarn. It's in your HAR portal. You can just go to the search term, like type in Forewarn, you'll find that. That's something that I do. That's just like a real quick, like if you just need a high level, vetting of someone. And the thing that I would add too, that hasn't already been said is, making sure you focus in on one area, especially with your investor clients, they're all like, just find me a good deal, right? And I'm like, that's not helpful, right? Like hone in on a specific neighborhood, a specific area so that you can start to understand who the tenant profiles are. That will definitely help you start to recognize patterns in terms of who people are, where they work at. So, I mean, someone's in this 288 South Corridor area. They're probably working at the medical center. They're working at some of the other employment centers around here. So that gives you kind of a sense of like who the potential buyers or potential renters are. And so I try to recommend that to my clients and say, hey, let's pick one area and get good at that one area and not just look all over the city. Because as y'all know, I mean, the demographics of Houston are so different. It could be different block to block, street to street, right? Even in 77033, I mean, it just feels like, I'm like, okay, if we're on Jutland or Mallow, I feel good. If we're on Reed, I feel good. Some other streets, I'm like, I don't really know that one. Like, you drive over there, I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? So those are all like, kind of depends on, obviously that, what's going on in the neighborhood. So, and those are things that I've learned as I've driving over here, having clients. I talk to the neighbors and I say, hey, tell me what's going on this street. Like, well, this one is, everybody's pretty good. On the other one, so just being able to, like you said, just really ingrain yourself in the community and really understand who the people are, and be there to serve as well, not just there to make a quick dollar. And so find ways that, that you can help the community. And that's unique. I don't necessarily even have an example of specifically what you could do. You really have to just have your ears to the ground and listen to what people need. But those are things that I would kind of add that aren't always, that's kind of a soft skill necessarily like the most practical thing you could do tomorrow. But it's something I think you should be either educating yourself on or educating your clients on.
I can add to that actually. So if
Mhm.
you are looking for a volunteer opportunity, Wire partners with Clean the Block. It's right here in Sunnyside. We do it once a month and we clean up trash in a myriad of places, but it's really easy to get involved. So if you are looking for opportunities to get involved in the community, that's been one of my favorite ways. It attracts like-minded people interested in real estate, people who want to give back to the community. So shameless plug right there.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
You guys have done a great job with that. I've really taken a hold of like the job you and Andrew have done with growing it. So it's huge. And it's sad too, because it's a public trash dump, like literally right here. People don't even realize
Actually
that
really difficult to dump stuff there. And that's part of the problem.
because of the documentation they want to see.
You have to have certain documentation. You can't bring certain things. If something is full, you got to go figure out where else to put it. So, but it's a whole thing and it takes a little work. But yeah, but we're thankful that it's there for sure.
Absolutely.
So I want you to tell us a little bit about how you are helping aspiring homeowners even get into duplexes and talk about some of the challenges that people are having. I know we talked about this off camera. Income requirements, debt requirements, like it is not the easiest market right now. What should people be doing in order to position themselves to take advantage of the market?
So what I'm doing is education. That's why I started the YouTube channel, because I just started recognizing a lot of people just were working off of outdated information. And I was like, okay, we got to figure out a way to educate buyers. And something me and Gilbert talk about all the time is I think realtors, we've been guilty of clickbaiting people sometimes and putting out the flashy Instagram videos that make people get excited about duplex investing. And then when we get into it, we may even get them all the way to closing. And then people are having bad experiences on the back end, right? So I never want my client to call me a year later and be like, we're in trouble, right? Because then that ruins their investment, right? They're not going to be repeat customers. They're going to not do real estate anymore. They're going to have that bad taste in their mouth. And so I really want people to have really positive experiences with real estate investing, with purchasing real estate. And so that does impact the kind of marketing that I particularly do in terms of how do we educate people more so than just get them excited on the concepts. And so what I have noticed though is I particularly have a legitimate profile, and we talk about it in one of our episodes where I'm finding people who are probably in anywhere from 60 to 80K price range in terms of like their annual salary. So these are people who are making a livable wage here in Houston. And there's two things happening. They're either making that much money and they're saving a bunch, meaning they're like living with their family, saving a bunch of money. So they make 75K a year and they got 40K in the bank, right? So that's a profile that we can work with. Or they're maybe on the higher end, they're maybe making six figures, 90K a year, but they have no savings, right? And so you're talking about your attorneys, people who are like, in situations where they maybe. So really kind of figure out with those people, how do we be flexible and creative with what their investment journey looks like? So being able to have multiple potential strategies. That's why I mentioned short-term rentals earlier, for people being able to maybe, feast during the holiday season, make a lot more money in Q4 to help you get through maybe Q2 that might be slow. So helping educate them on those things. And then also, I know we're talking about duplexes, but, house hacking isn't just multifamily. So being able to maybe purchase a single family home and rent it out to roommates. And that's something that a lot of people don't want to do. But we're in a season where I tell people like, hey, we're not really in an economic environment where you get to have options if you don't got a bag. So if you don't got 20% to bring to the table, then we're going to have to be creative here, right? And so I think I also want to empower people that even buying single family is not a letdown. Like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, duplex isn't on the table for you, because especially here in Sunnyside, the duplexes are getting a little bit more expensive, right? So you do realistically have to be in a strong financial position to really move on some of the product that we have here. So just kind of educating them on other ways they can invest, right? And so whether that's renovating a garage apartment or getting a roommate, not as attractive, and it doesn't work for everybody. If you got 3 kids and a spouse, maybe you're renting out a room in your house, doesn't make sense, right? But if you're single, or you're in a situation where you can do that, that's something that I've been educating people on, just showing them that there are other options. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the asset. It's about obviously like lowering your expenses, making more money, or ultimately just getting in the game. And so that's something that I've been kind of educating people on.
Also say like just building community, right? I think that's kind of the theme throughout, building community. Women tend to be very good at that. There are so many single parent households that can combine and share the work of caregiving, the expenses of a home, and really put ourselves a little bit further ahead rather than each of us doing it alone. So I think that's really important. And then what I don't hear a lot of people talking about is purchasing these types of properties for their kids, especially going to college, right? You're going to have to pay room and board. Somebody has to pay room and board. I have a client, she just bought a house for her son in Atlanta, and all his room and board is being paid for by the other tenants in the house. Young professionals, other college kids. Now he's there managing it, making sure the house doesn't get torn up. So you have to have a responsible child, right? But he's now a homeowner, and now he's building equity. And now that can go into a family trust. It can go to him later. There's so many options. So kitty condo loans is a real possibility. And especially if you can get a duplex where you're looking at 3 or 6 different rooms you can rent out to college students who are going to have to pay somewhere. TSU has a horrible situation. They don't have enough housing.
And PV.
A lot of these schools are really struggling. And because it's your child living in the house, it often qualifies for like an FHA. So you're getting it really low. So I think that's just something that we haven't really touched on.
So that's one thing, that a retirement strategy is a little bit different. You got to really educate people, help them understand that if you are doing it from a retirement standpoint, you're not doing it for the monthly cash flow. Like you're doing this for the 8 to 10 window. I've had some leads that are like in their late 50s, early 60s, and maybe they're a little bit behind on their retirement planning. So they need something that they can cash out in 10 years. So I think that's a really strong play, where if they can get a stabilized property like this one, where tenants, turnkey, ride it out, keep it stabilized, and then either sell it when you get to that point where you kind of need to beef up the savings a little bit, or at that point you've been paying on it for 10 years and you put a sizable down payment, you really at that point are going to start getting to significant cash flow. So that's another thing that profile or person that we don't talk a lot about. It's like, like retired, like people who are, baby boomers, like, hey, that real estate is still a great play, even when you have a short investment horizon, like maybe 10 to 15 years.
And I would also argue you can move into the property, because a lot of people are stuck in a renting situation after they retire. Once you retire and you don't have regular income coming in, or your income is lower because now you're on, and now it's harder to get a mortgage. It's harder to afford what you would normally be able to afford. So making sure that you're planning for that ahead of time. And then something that nobody really talks about is once you get to past upper retirement ages, right? How are you estate planning so that your family, or so that you're not required to sell your home as you need assisted living and care? And as the administration changes, access to that care is becoming harder and harder to get. So making sure, like, if you had a property like this, or even if you have a 1-story like this, how do you then turn it into something like an assisted living where you can have more retirement age people coming in? So those are all things that we need to be considering, and especially as realtors, making sure that we're educating our clients on, not just getting them in the home and then disappearing, but making sure that you're a consultant for their lifetime and for their family.
You guys bring up 2 good points, because I can share with you real life proprietary information, but some of our biggest clients right now retirees, like folks that are about to retire. You know, we have a couple, we just did a tear down for them, and we're going to build a duplex or two based on, you know, how this replat comes back. But that's a growing segment right now. They know they don't have as much in their 401k, and Social Security is tight. So they're building these duplexes to provide income. And also, let's be honest, it's tough economic times. You might have a child that lives with you, but now this gives them a job. Even my business partner, he recently built a duplex, and his son is like 24, 25, and this gives him more responsibility, right? He gave him the option, hey, son, do you want to live in one unit or do you want to rent both of them out? It's completely up to you. So it's more than just the retirement, as you mentioned, and the opportunity for kids that are in college to have housing. You know, we have TSU Rice here. That's a real thing. TSU, Rice, U of H, Texas Women's University, Baylor College of Medicine, all these people need places to live. And you'd be surprised at how many students actually live in this area. We actually had a U of H football player live on a property 1 block over on Carmen Street a couple of years back. He had a small family already, so the duplex was perfect for him. You know, he was a senior and he had a girlfriend and a kid, so they lived in the duplex for I think 2 years, and then they moved out. But it's just so much versatility you can do with these duplexes. You guys are all aware of it, so it's cool. But it's neat to actually see people that wouldn't have done this 10 years ago. They got the interest in it now too. Like I mentioned, we're working for that one couple. They're in their 60s right now, and they're thinking about legacy and what to do for their kids and grandkids. And this is just some of it.
So I want to touch on 2 more items before we transition to the Q&A. I want to talk about construction because it really is a make or break if you are purchasing something or if you're looking to be a developer, a builder, et cetera. Who you work with, how you vet the product is so important. So can you tell us a little bit about what good construction looks like, what good systems look like?
To that. So before we ever built anything, one of the things I had to do was educate myself. So I went around, there were a lot of duplexes that were built in Sunnyside, like between 2003 and 2007 before the Great Recession. So I went around and I talked to a lot of the tenants that lived in them. I had some rental property on some of the streets. And so they gave me kind of some feedback on the duplexes, the issues they had with their duplexes. Granted, these were about 10 years old now, 10 to 12 years old now. And it had me really conceptualize that, man, how you build is going to last with you. It's going to be your brand. Even after the sale is long gone, like these reputations, they live on. Like people in the community, they'll tell you about certain builders and they'll be like, they don't like this or that about them. So it was important for us to build with quality. That's one of the things we did. I know there's a lot of pressure on developers and builders nowadays to build for as cheap as possible to create the good returns. But I think a lot of people, they don't think about the long-term viability and how your product is. You know, a building that's 10 years old, that's still new. It shouldn't have certain issues. And a lot of people don't know this, but we like to study it. One of the biggest issues for lawsuits with builders in our area right now is mold, right? Mold intrusion and how mold growth is happening in a lot of new construction homes. And a lot of people don't have visibility to one of the most important things in construction, in my opinion, in this part of the country where we are. It's how fast did that builder get the property, what's called dried in, with the roof and shingles done, so there's no water intrusion during the development. Because what happens and what can tend to happen on those projects that take a little bit of time and they get rained in for like 2-3 months, and then you see the sheetrock thrown up, but you don't realize what's behind that sheetrock. There's no inspection process right now with the city of Houston that checks for mold during the build. Yeah, there might be an inspector that says, hey, I don't like how this is looking. Y'all have to remediate it. But for the most part, they don't check that. So sometimes you have mold growth already happening and everything looks bright and shiny and new. And you just can't tell that because the house wasn't sealed up as properly that these things can happen. There's even some material I'm starting to personally see used a little bit more that really, in my opinion, shouldn't be used in our area because of hurricane force winds and how strong. I know it's cheaper material, but you shouldn't use it for long-term sustainability, in my opinion. We haven't built with it. Everything we build with is with OSB sheathing or zip panels. We don't ever build with a thermoply. It's not like I'm knocking people that do, but just to understand what potentially may be coming down the line. And that's something I try to get a lot of younger developers and builders to understand too. The show ain't over at I sold the house. 10 years from now, they can still pull you into a lawsuit and you still have to deal with it. Right. So that's something that's important too. So to me, the first thing in just acknowledging what good construction is how fast do they get the property dried in? That's a fair question to ask. And if they don't want to answer that, well, there's transparency where you can see that in the market online. You can see how long it took them from the time they poured the concrete to the time they actually had certain inspections done. So that gives you a clue on how long it took to get dried in. Because honestly, too, when homes aren't constructed with good quality, it can impact the homes that are built with good quality around it, like with appraisals and different things. So it impacts everybody. So it's always important to us to get stuff dried in as fast as possible. We always use quality material, 30-year shingles. We never build with cheap shingles. We know this is a hurricane city we live in, so we're always building with 30-year. We always use quality flooring. I understand, being a landlord myself, yeah, it's cheaper to use a carpet, and some people like that carpet feel, but being a landlord, I understand if I put that carpet in, within 2-3 years, I'm having to change it out. And that's a whole process. So everything we build now is going to be LVP or tile, something that can be mopped and cleaned very easily and is very durable. You're not having to change this floor for at least 15, 20 years. And even from a tax perspective, so many people think about money like only the money you make from selling the duplex. But once you own it, the bonus depreciation, right? This has a different factor than carpet does. So this is saving me and making me more money than it would be if I just put carpet in everything. So it's that's also a part of it, just having a long-term vision on how you're going to build, because your brand is going to follow you long after the closing table.
And I would say a tip for realtors, not every realtor advises their client to do home inspections throughout the building process, and you should. It's important. You once sheetrock is up, you can't see beyond the walls, and you can't trust that it's been done properly just by the word of the person who has, something to win by you finishing the build, and you can't really necessarily trust the city inspectors. So make sure you have a private inspector that is going through these new build homes. To you, what does quality look like? Like what are the biggest things that you see in the market where you're just like, that's not going to last?
I think I brought it up already, the sheathing. How was a property sheathed? Sheathing is just the external material that's used that's in front of the siding, or that's behind the siding or behind the brick. I know a lot of people are using a cheaper material because it's much cheaper than wood, but it's not even recommended by large builders associations to be used in this market. But a lot of the big builders, they have lobbyists, they have deep pockets, so they just get the politicians to, hey, yeah, we can still go with it. So that's important. 10 years from now, you shouldn't have certain issues, right? And then also quality build, to me, we live in a flood city. We live in a city where the foundations move a lot. What type of fill dirt was used before you see the building up? That's a big key. Some of the stuff you can see visually. If you ever come on a construction job and you notice that the dirt where the building is going to be is like a dark brown color, it's not good. It's cheaper dirt. And so I can promise you that house is going to have foundation issues within 15 years, right? There's cheap fill dirt that can cost you like $10, $30 a load. It's just cheaper, and it just moves more. So there's a reason they do soil testing before you get engineering done, because they want to know what type of foundation you're going to need to build. But one of the things we do at Grace Building Company, we always use quality fill dirt. We're never going to build on top of something that's going to move, because we understand that liability and how you can still be tied to it years from now. I don't want to be 60 years old getting sued for something that happened when I was 38. That's one of the important things for us. Just the type of fill dirt that's used. And then also the quality of wood being used. That's something also, admittedly, it doesn't get inspected by the city inspectors. There's certain things they check for, certain things they don't check for, right? Most of the quality wood that's supposed to be used in framing is number 2 lumber, right? Number 2 lumber is the quality lumber that you're going to use in most of the framing, but sometimes people want to get away with number 3 lumber because it's a little bit cheaper, but it's just much risky. It's just risky. And then I would also say, just in the finishes, I know every house has a different price point, but I think with your finishes, you really want to be careful too, because those are things that you want to be able to be replicated, purchased online very quickly, or somewhere you'd be able to, get it again. That's a kind of a little bit of a risk when you get cheap stuff from China, is it can go bad sometimes. I've done that admittedly. And so we learn from those mistakes, and we just go forward with using better products that last longer. It might be a little bit more of a cost up front, but you don't want someone unhappy with your product like 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now. We don't want that.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that. Just to kind of give Gilbert his flowers. Builders that are really transparent about their process. I don't know how many events y'all go to where you get to actually meet a builder and hear his value system. And so I like that. I'm like, this is somebody who's accountable to his community. And so that's something, if you are thinking about, building, definitely, I think Gilbert is that's just another soft thing, right? Where you don't necessarily, you can go with other builders that, X, Y, and Z, but can you ask that person transparent questions? Are they going to give you transparent answers about their process? I think it's important. Another kind of tip that you can kind of tell in terms of builder quality is their job site cleanliness. So like, what does their job site look like? If you go to the job site, what's the temperament of their trades? Does it seem like there's accountability there? Those are things that I have started to pay attention to. And just in terms of what is the attention to detail that this builder as a whole, from the accounts receivable person all the way down to the trade, is there somebody who cares about attention to detail? And that's going to show up in terms of cleanliness, right? And that's just how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so I think those are something that as realtors or as owners or builders or potentially landowners, just pay attention to those things. You know what I mean? Like, are those things that are being taken care of? And obviously, like the wood quality, those are things that you can walk around and look at it and you can see. And I was on a build site the other day, and I appreciated that builder because their trades had made a pile of like the wood that they weren't going to use, and I could look and see like, oh, I saw they were going to use that, and they took it out, and I was like, oh, I appreciate that. Like that was something, because as a realtor, I was going to point it out, and they had already done it. So those are some things that at the staging process that you can kind of. So
I also like when I'm able to go to current sites under contract or under construction and be able to look at the cleanliness, be able to look at the organization, tell how many people are on the job site, tell who is managing the people, when's the last time the builder's been to the property. Those types of things definitely tell a story about the quality of the product that you're going to get. I think one of the most important things, though, are the financials. Like, how do our financials work in this process? And that goes before we get to the lender, right? I want you to talk about how you purchase, what your numbers looked like, what your pro forma looks like. And then I want you to tell us how you calculate your deals so that you are able to leave enough in the budget for really high quality materials and trades.
So first, like from a development perspective, the most important thing is the land, right? It's the land. You can't build without land. So many times people will call me and ask me, well, how much is it going to cost to build a duplex? And I ask them, do you own land? And they say, no. Well, I'm like, well, you're kind of going backwards. So the first thing you want to focus on is the land, right?
And when you buy your land, are you looking at 20% of your ARV, 30%?
I'm a little bit more conservative. I look for 10 to 15%. So I'm not going to spend more than 10 to 15%.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry, we're getting like,
that's fine.
Where are you finding land that inexpensively?
Well, here's the thing that I learned from some other people that have done it longer than I have. Like, can I really call myself a developer if I don't have an inventory and reinvest the money back into land? So that's, a lot of the duplexes I've sold in the past, I didn't go out and run and buy cars and we treated ourselves a little bit, but what we did is we went and bought land with it.
And to be clear, you're talking more about land banking, basically. You're buying it ahead of the curve.
Yep.
And so because you've been doing this for a long time, and that's a key, right? Working with a developer and a builder that's been doing it a while so that you had the foresight to purchase the land when it was less expensive.
Yep.
And now you can pass on that cost savings to your end buyer.
To the product, too. We can build with quality because we didn't overpay for the land. I'll give you an example, like this exact lot where we are standing right now. It's 60 by 200, so it's 12,000 square feet. And this was before livable places. We bought this lot all in a little under $60,000, right? And so that's well under that 10 to 15% number.
Yeah, you're good.
The total value.
It's double that.
That doesn't exist.
More than double that.
Forward
4 times that amount probably now.
I'm sorry? This lot, we probably purchased it in 2020 or 2021. And so between this duplex and the duplex in the back, the ARV here is probably close to like $1.1 million. So it's well under that 10 to 15% number. But to move things forward to more time, to, to recent times like right now, right? It's tough to buy like one lot, a 5,000 square foot lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll use that as an example and think you're going to make a bunch of money on it if you can't replat it. So now as a smart and seasoned developer, the way you guys need to be thinking is I need to buy land that I can build more than one property on.
Absolutely.
And before you rush and do that, this is what I tell a lot of people. It's free. It doesn't cost you a penny. A fail-proof method to make sure that you're complying with today's deed restrictions and other things is once you get a lot or you know of a lot that's for sale, take the legal description, send it to one of your title contacts, right? And just tell them, hey, send me the most updated deed restrictions. And you'll notice, like, especially someone mentioned 77021. I live in that zip code. I live in Riverside Terrace. So even some of the subdivisions around it, they recently went in like 2020, 2021 and redid some of the deed restrictions. A lot of people, unfortunately, they don't like duplex development. They don't like townhome development. So they're kind of fighting those types of things. And even the lot size, they're fighting with minimum lot sizes. So before you invest in land, make sure you get the most updated deed restrictions, because what you'll find that happens, a lot of these lots that are on the market now, reason they're on the market is because the buyer bought it, didn't do their homework, and figured out, oh, I can't do this. And now they have to, find someone to sell it to, and they're not going to be exactly as transparent as you would like,
Mm-hmm.
so that's part of it too, just covering those bases. And so to moving into just recent times, I know that price is from 2020. So if you're buying land today, the best and highest use is to buy a lot that you can subdivide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the guy we use to replat, I'll be honest, he's the best in the business. Like, I had to go the long route and find like my architects, the guys that use to replat. He's been doing this a long time. Like he's been doing this over 30 years in Houston. So to me, he's had the best replat prices, the best process. I mean, from start to finish, he's done in like 3 months.
Are you going to tell us his name?
I will. I'm not a gatekeeper. I mean, because I want everybody to have good experiences too. So I'm going to share that with you, Brittany. That's not an issue. I mean, I'm not a gatekeeper of information. The name of the company is EIC Surveying, Everything in Christ Surveying. They're a little bit far. If you're a South Sider like me, it's way up on Jones Road, but his company has really been the best experience I've had. And from a value perspective as well, he's probably 20% less than everyone else.
Wow.
I don't know if he needs to know that, but he's been really good at getting in and out of projects too. Like we kind of brought that highest and best use into Sunnyside with the replatted duplexes. So, I had to take the long road and meet people and shake a lot of hands. And so, I'm not a gatekeeper of information. I mean, I don't have a scarcity mindset. I think I can't have everything. I can't do everything. So why not other people be able to benefit too? Because if I'm honest, and if I think long term, unlike some people, if you do well, and I'm an investor here too, I'm doing well if you're doing well. So why am I going to withhold information from you that's going to help you? I mean, it's crazy if all of us aren't succeeding and doing well. And we're just going in circles, so that's part of it too, just having a long-term mindset too and not scarcity mindset.
Yeah. If there's any young agents or agents that are getting their license, highest and best use is actually going to be on your test most likely. So that's like the one thing that I remember. Okay, I remember that from the book. That's the only thing I practically used from my classes. But so.
Yeah, even if you look at this lot, like before livable places passed, we could fit 2 duplexes on it. If you drive around now on this same size lot, people are fitting 4 duplexes on it. So we have some of those opportunities too. I know, Brittany, you mentioned we still own several lots in this area too. So we'd be interested in partnering with people if they want to, and we can do some of that too, because now, because of the price we purchased it for, now we're well under that 10 to 15% ARV number, because now the density is increased. So it's amazing. I would have never thought in a million years on this, you can build 4 duplexes now. So it's pretty easy to do. It's the same kind of stuff we've already done. You guys notice the shared driveway and when you're outside, and then the catch basins for the water. It's just certain things that, now I know that I wish I would have known then that, we have some inherent value in some of these lots we bought. We were lucky with the timing.
if somebody is kind of the other part of this is if they are purchasing a duplex,
Yeah.
tell us about how the numbers need to work in terms of what does their rental price need to look like versus their sales price? How do they need to approach it in order to be able to do short-term rental? And how does that affect the amount down they're going to need to bring?
That's a good question you bring up, especially now in this day and age. I know you guys are aware the city of Houston is going to be regulating short-term rentals at the start of the year. They were going to start the registration August 1st, but they pushed it back to October 1st. I'm aware of some of the rules and some of the different things they're requiring now. They want a paper trail. And so the city wants a paper trail of accountability and liability to the owner of the duplex and the owner of these spaces where Airbnbs and short-term rentals are run. So if you're buying, if you're going to be an owner occupant, obviously the best loans are FHA, VA, right? And then there's some conventional 5% down products. But the interesting thing people need to really hone in on is with FHA loans, it's 3.5% down, right? But the FHA loan does not allow you to run transient businesses in any of the spaces. This is even after a year and you've moved out. You still can't use a loan to operate rentals under 30 days, right? So that's important to know because there's a paper trail being formed now. And so you want to protect your investors and buyers that may not know. They think, oh, it's cool to run Airbnb. It's really not. And, now this paper trail is being created. So you really want to be careful there. I know there's a VA loan for the military personnel too, and their families at 0% down, one of the best loans. It also precludes you from being able to run that type of business. So in an FHA loan, the only way you can run the FHA place is if, like, let's say I'm living in this unit and I am short-term renting, like, in the same unit I live in. I have to live here too, literally to the unit. So you got to really be careful about how those rules read. But, FHA and VA are some of the best loans for owner occupants. Now, when you come to, what does rent look like? Again, I always lean on people to, hey, lean back with the realtor community. They have access to the MLS and they can tell you what the median rents are in these duplexes. I know a lot of times people always, they'll ask me, like, what's the likelihood of me finding a tenant that's going to pay XYZ? I'm like, well, you have to look at it like this. They may be able to get in the door with that high rent, but will they still be there in 8 months? I've gone through all of this. I can tell you, I've got clients that pay 26, 27, 2,800. They last about 5 to 6, 7 months, then they're gone, right? And then now you're scrambling. And then the bad part about it that, I've noticed even in some cases, so when you use an FHA loan, and you don't ever owner occupy it, you're putting so much pressure and stress on yourself, pressure and stress as a buyer. Not only is that not legal for you to do, but now you have this higher debt service. You thought you could run these plays that you really can't. And then remember, you need to live somewhere. So you're paying rent and a mortgage somewhere else. So now you're stressed out. And so that's why y'all see a lot of duplexes that were bought in the last 2 to 3 years are being resold right now, because I can promise you in probably half of those cases, they were FHA and they never lived there.
Mhm.
So, that's coming up more. And I think you'll start to see a lot more of that after the new year. So activity for y'all is really going to pick up in 2026 because you're going to see a lot of duplexes come on the market for sale.
Mhm.
And so there's going to be a lot of offers. They're coming.
Yeah.
Hold on. They're about to come. Watch.
So
Let's sit tight.
one thing I want to add to that, in terms of, because you asked, like, what does that mean in terms of your purchase price and all those things? I think there's like 2 perspectives I have on this, and like some people agree or don't, so we can workshop it and talk about it. Like we've talked about, every investment doesn't necessarily have to cash flow, right? So when we talk about purchase price to what you can get for rent, people say, well, that's not a good deal because I'm not cash flowing or they're not paying the mortgage, right? Well, I like to encourage people, well, like, what are your expenses going to be? Like, you are doing owner occupied, right? If your expenses are going to be lower than what it would cost you to rent, then I still
You're winning. Absolutely
Yeah.
winning.
Because ultimately, like, your expenses are going to go down as you pay down your mortgage. Obviously, your taxes and insurance could go up, so that messes with the numbers. But like, theoretically, your payments are going to go down over time, and then you can increase your rent over time. So we're talking about a long-term play. Even if you're not cash flowing, so we're like, you getting paid every month, like your bank account's getting higher, you're still saving money, and you could be increasing your savings rate. You could be figuring out other ways to make that work. So that's something that I encourage people to think about. standpoint. Hey, this is investment isn't always just a cash flow game. I honestly think that is a lot. Really transparently, I think it's really hard for people to get to that cash flow number right now
Yeah.
unless they have a strong cash position. So that's the other thing that I say for people. I know we always say you can go FHA and put 3.5% down. Depending on like what their strategy is, I've actually been recommending people like, hey, like strengthen your cash position. So, maybe push out your horizon 6 months, 9 months out. And that's something that's crazy to say as a realtor. I'm like, hey, listen, like wait a year. And I'm like, yo, I'm gonna try business right now. But like realistically, I would be like, yo, like get really aggressive with your savings rate so that you have more cash and you have more options and more flexibility when you are. So I have been telling people that, like, hey, listen, like, don't buy right now if you're gonna stress it. If we're gonna be in stress, if you are living with a family member or you do have low expenses right now, like max out how much you can save. Like, don't go on the vacations. I hate when I see my clients and they're buying in 3 months and they're like on vacation right now. And I'm like, okay, so what, you about to spend $5,000 on your vacation and that's $5,000 that we could have used over here. So really get them to lock in, maybe a year out savings rate so that they can get closer to that 20% number if they can, because that does bring the numbers, to more competitive to where you need to be. So I think that'll be a good question for Andrea as well, because I'm sure you might have some thoughts on that. But yeah.
And more stickiness realtors can create with their clients. You just told me something that we do too, and I'll share it with you guys because it creates more stickiness. So same buyer, more business over time instead of just at the sale. One thing a lot of people don't know because they're new investors, how to protest taxes. You don't need a license to protest taxes here in Harris County.
And everybody should do it every year.
You have to do it every year. So, and people mistakenly think, well, I have to tell Harris County how much we really paid for this, and you don't. Texas is a non-disclosure state. So they send you, after you close on a deal, they'll send the owner like this letter in 30 days and ask, well, how much did you pay for this? Don't fill that out and don't send it to them. Like even this property here, like this literal one, like I protest everything every year. I think the taxable value on this one is like $400K or $420, something like that. So if it's a owner occupant buying this, I think the formula is like 1.6% of 420, which is probably like about $6,000 or something. Divide 6,000 by 12, that's about $500 a month in property taxes here. If it's a commercial loan, then it's going to be, if it's not homeowner occupied, it's like 2.09%. But that's a skill set that you guys can develop and create stickiness with your clients, protesting their taxes annually for them. You can just show up at the office or do it virtually. It's like, you guys know already how to use your time as realtors. So that's a way to create more stickiness too, and value, and also a way to monetize, because a lot of the professional firms, they'll charge their clients like 1/3 of the savings. And so the big firms like O'Connor and Associates and other big firms like that, they'll charge 1/3, but you don't need a special license to do this, right? You guys have the market data, right? So you guys know the architects who have the same floor plans. It could be the same architect, same floor plan, and the valuation difference is like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. That's access y'all have that y'all can use to weaponize against the county to help create stickiness with your client. And it's just another value add because you don't need a license to do it, right? So that's another way for you to, drive more business out of that sale versus just the sale, right? And then, it creates stickiness because then you're staying in contact with your client, and then you never know, they may be ready for another duplex. We have customers, we build multiple duplexes for them, right? That's the ultimate play, I think. I encourage everyone to learn development and just learn some of those concepts, because that's where you can uncover value, and that's where you can create value for other people, right? Just all around in this area, we built probably over 50 duplexes in the area. So it's just a different way for people to be able to create stickiness with clients, and also different from buying retail, right? If you have a client that's interested in building, that's another way for you as a realtor or a developer or whatever your role is to also monetize, but also create value for someone else.
I'm going to ask if there are any questions so far. I knew you had a question. Go ahead.
So I want to know about what's your take on it?
Okay, it's controversial, but I'll share my take since you gave it to me. Well, as an investor, if I'm doing a long term, if it's me buying it, I'm not going to buy in a flood zone. The reason I'm not going to buy in a flood zone is because of 3 reasons. Number one, you're buying in a flood zone in Houston, so that means the flood insurance is going to be required. And with insurance just fluctuating, that's not a fixed expense anymore. That can jump up and change, right?
Yeah.
And so also as an investor, I'm going to want to refinance this, pull money out of it, or sell it. So how I look, I invested in the flood zone duplex that's right around the corner, right up down here, literally. But then there's 100 other ones down here that not in the flood zone. It's going to be a little bit tougher for you to compete with them on the refinance side and the valuation side. Now, build to sell, I get that. I get people because they're like, well, it's not an issue I'm going to deal with. But even when you build it to sell it, building a flood zone, it takes longer. I know because I've done it several times. It takes a little bit longer because you're waiting on these elevation certificates. You're waiting on the FEMA inspections with the city. So it's going to take you like a month to sometimes even 6 weeks, sometimes 2 months longer to build in a flood zone than it does in a non-flood zone. So I'm always thinking about the velocity of money too. Having money stuck versus, okay, in a non-flood zone, I'm very confident I can get in and out of this project in 4 or 5 months. But so it's a number of things. From a long-term hold perspective, I don't buy in flood zones, me personally. I'm not saying anyone else shouldn't, but I gave you my reasons. But most investors, if you talk to investors, they'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
We had Hurricane Harvey happen 2017. There were a lot of properties that weren't in flood zones that flooded, and that created a lot of, just a lot of trouble too. That's also one of the reasons why a lot of my duplexes, I like to do 2-story, because 1-story duplexes, the bad thing with that in Houston, we hope it never happens. If it floods, you have 100% vacancy now. With me having a 2-story, okay, maybe, up 3 feet up high, you won't be able to in a bit, but you may be able to live upstairs. But we had that happen. A lady I knew, she bought a 50-unit apartment complex in like April of 2017, non-flood zone. She never made more than $60,000 a day in her life. She was a nurse in her 50s, getting ready to, get ready for retirement. Well, Harvey happened 4 months later. The whole thing flooded, and she went 100% vacant, lost her property. So, it's just some of those things. But I'm not saying that to hate on anyone that builds in flood zones or wants to buy in a flood zone. But from an investor perspective, you have to take that look if you're going to own a duplex.
Even on the resale perspective,
Resale, you're
the
going to
affordability of the property for your end buyer is going to be more difficult because they have to get that insurance. And insurance costs
written into underwriting.
Yeah, insurance costs for normal properties here in Houston now are pricing people out of the market. You add a flood zone on top of that, and you're making your buyer pool very narrow.
Yeah, you just have to think like an investor. That's it. I mean, me personally, I don't buy in flood zones. I bought 2 properties in flood zones. There is a process you can go through. It's called Letter of Map Amendment, LOMA. If you own property and it's in a flood zone and it never flooded, especially if you owned it during Harvey, if it never flooded, there's a process you can go through FEMA and through the government. It takes about 3-4 months, but it's worth it. You can actually get your individual property outside of the flood zone, so you won't have that requirement. But me personally, I just don't invest in flood zones, but I don't say that to knock anyone that does. More power to you if you do. I don't.
All right, can we give these gentlemen a round of applause?
Shameless plug. So this property is for sale. And so if you have buyers that are interested, and we're at 520, there's also some incentives available as well to help with any, I think we're doing around 2% to help with like closing costs and things like that. So this is an example of the properties that we're talking about in terms of that are done the right way. So if you want to compare this to other things just on the market and what
and it's a real tenant here, 2,500. Yeah. Fernando, I asked him not to be here. We professionally cleaned it. But interestingly enough, he sells, not furniture. He sells clothing on airline in one of the flea markets, but he's been great, pays on time all the time. So he's here. Also one of those midterm dudes that like can't afford a house, doesn't want to be in an apartment. His wife and kids come and go from time to time. Right now they're gone, but it's just him. So that's a beautiful thing too. It's just one person. So he's not really damaging anything. He's working all day, 7 days a week. He comes back around 8 o'clock at night. He does it again, 8 in the morning, he's gone. So yeah, $2,500 a month. And yeah, all of this comes with it too. Like, then through the sales, I leave the furniture and the TVs. It's not worth like storing and all of that. So we just leave it,
Fully
TVs are so cheap now. Yeah. It's what? Yeah, both units are furniture. I'm not going to take the furniture with me and pay to store it, It's
So
not
yeah,
like
day one income at this side, and then obviously picking up where you left off next door with the short-term rental. So yeah, I appreciate you guys just send it out to your clients if you have any that are interested, and then any feedback you have on the listing for the realtors in the room, or just if you're not a realtor, and you just want to look at it, we have some information on the table there. I need to update that. We've done a price change since some of that information was put out, but that has all the MLS information on it, if you on tax rate and all that kind of stuff.
So we're going to shift to our Q&A with our lender. So if you have lending questions, definitely write them down, let us have them.
Boy,
Okay, so we all know that the lending process is the most crucial part of the home purchase. Like without the lender, nothing gets done. Well, I won't say that. There are other alternatives, but 9 times out of 10, you have to use a really great lender. So go ahead and introduce yourself first.
I'm Andrea Fowler. I've been in business 24 years. I worked straight through the mortgage process. Spent the last since 2017 working more focused on the Community Reinvestment Act mortgage lending. First-time home buyers. Love working with first-time home buyers. Even though it can be a little bit more dense and at times, it's a lot more work. There's nothing better than seeing a first-time home buyer close, especially if it's someone like such as myself. I did not grow up with a lot of money. My father was an artist to 5 kids, so you can imagine what that was like. Plus we were all crazy. But long story short, it's, when you don't grow up with a lot of money and you're closing loans for people who maybe they're the first in their entire family that ever owned, it's a big deal to see that happen. So that's part of the reason why I've really liked working in what's known as the CRA mortgage lending side, but also in the first-time home buyer. But also because we're not really taught financial literacy in schools anymore. So for me, it's a big deal to really begin to teach people, hey, this is the right way to do this. I'd rather lose a loan because I spent more time on a first-time home buyer than just be like, hey, just send me your docs. That's not how I work. I'm very protective of my borrowers. And I have a reputation for that. But I've been doing it for a long time. But and I do everything from done a lot of mortgage loans for NFL players, CEOs. In fact, what was crazy when COVID first hit, I cannot tell you how many phone calls I got from NFL players bawling, crying on the phone because you don't play, you don't get paid. And it was a really, really good opportunity because a lot of these guys, some of them I grew up with, where I got an opportunity to really kind of sit them down and go, remember all those conversations we had about you and all your friends? Yeah, that's stopping. And all the Birkin bags that we were buying for our girlfriends and that's stopping. So it's for me, being a mortgage lender is not just being a mortgage lender. It's a lot more about teaching money and teaching the proper way to go about doing it. And what I've begun to do since 2024 is really kind of steer myself more towards, we had a lot happen in the mortgage industry beginning in 2022 when the rates started to slowly dive upward. And it was a moment where I remember saying to myself, oh God, you've really got to learn how to pivot here, because with rates increasing, plus property taxes increasing, plus homeowners insurance increasing, especially in Texas and Florida. And at the time I was lending in Florida. It's really knocking out a wide swath of the market. So many people that could have bought a $300,000, $400,000 home, they're now regulated to a 200 to 250, 275. That's not a bad thing, actually. It kind of is a devil's advocate sort of situation. And just so everybody's clear, when I first got into this industry in 2001, 6.875 with a 1% rate, origination, that was standard. We're right back there. We're right where we were when I started. So A 6.875 rate is really good, actually. I remember my mom being so ecstatic that she got a 13% interest rate. So we could have it 10 times worse. It could be a lot worse. And believe me, I have seen some high rates from hard money lending, which you
Mhm.
brought up. But back to the beginning and how I work, I really, I try to meet people's needs. I mean, my job is to deliver on my fiduciary duty, and I take that very, very seriously.
Tell us a little bit more about, for the realtors in the room, how should they be preparing their clients for a duplex purchase? And for anybody who's looking to have a purchase here,
Mhm.
what should they be prepared with?
Thanks.
And
I mean, it really is that simple. Savings are very, even if you don't need, even if a buyer doesn't end up using that money, savings is so critical. It, I can't, even if somebody isn't buying an investment property or a duplex or this or, whatever. I myself, a perfect example of moving, and next thing I know, something that should have only cost me, you know, I thought $3,000 to do ended up costing me damn near 6,000.
Mhm.
So, it's all the little things that you don't think of, especially when you're buying a duplex. It's, oh, hey, because you're not going to get the Gilberts. You're not going to get a seller that's got them furnished. It's the blinds. It's the little things here and there that you're going to need. It's the little holders for the toilet paper roll. It's
Mhm.
all those little things.
It's the
And
alarm system, it's the gate out front, yeah.
it's the little conveniences that you want to offer to somebody who potentially may rent.
Mhm.
And it's not just that, but it's also having the savings for, the emergency. I mean, there are areas of Houston, you brought up Harvey, where nobody anticipated that they would flood. Our girlfriend, who I made fun of, I actually did her mortgage, made fun of her for buying flood insurance. Hers and 4 other homes in her neighborhood were the only ones that didn't flood. And she was right there, right off of, she still is actually, Memorial and the Beltway. There's a little, neighborhood back there, and they literally were stuck back there for 2 weeks, could not get in or out. So, it's that part of the Beltway that crashed into the Beltway, or Memorial went into the Beltway. Anyway, long story short, money, savings, 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 savings. Always have it, because you won't never want to get caught on the fly where you don't have the capability to help your renter.
Mhm.
Say you get it, and 2 weeks later there's an incident. You want to talk about mold? I can't tell you how many times. In fact, the bank I worked for at one point, we had to change our entire guidelines because we had a client that went in, bought a house. 2 days later, they went on vacation for 3 weeks in Colombia, came back. The entire property was black mold because we had an issue that was happening in the third ward where builders were going into neighborhoods and gutting homes and flipping them and selling them and making everything look okay. And they did look okay. And then lo and behold, you find out later, no, they just slapped paint on. They didn't truly do a good reno. They didn't do a good build. We had quite a few builders that I myself personally blackballed from the bank
Mhm.
for that very reason. And, that poor couple that literally that was their life savings that they put into this house. They go to visit family and come back, and it's absolutely an unlivable home. They had to bulldoze it.
Wow.
So, and the bank that I work for was very good about taking care of them, but not all banks are going to do that.
Yeah. So I want you to talk a little bit about how the numbers play out when you are purchasing a duplex versus when you're purchasing something single family.
It's basically the same. And also it really depends on where you are financially. Credit score, of course, plays a huge role, but it's also how much you want to put into it, which versus how long do you plan to own it? How much do you plan to rent it out for? You can basically, I mean, we lend on a 1 to 4 property guidance. So a duplex is no more different than buying a single family crime home.
Except that you're able to use the rental
Yes,
income.
70% of the rent if it's rented.
Mm-hmm.
So some lenders are very strict, not all of them, but some lenders, and again, this is very much program dependent. Some lenders, you don't have it already leased, they're not going to let you use that. If you don't have income there, how are you going to,
Right.
if that makes sense?
Right. No, so that's super important. So making sure that when you're qualifying a client, you understand if the property is not already leased, like what Gilbert does for his clients,
Right.
you might not be able to use that towards the
Correct.
income of your client. And if it is, you should only be allocating about 70%.
Well, typically the standard allocation is 70% across the board, 9 times out of 10. I mean, that's just a good measure to use. Typically, when when I process somebody and I look at a loan application, I always go worst case scenario on cost and worst case scenario on conditions, because I want to prepare them for the worst. And then if none of that ever happens, hey, we were prepared for it. We've got the finances. We've got everything lined up. We know exactly what we're walking into. I don't like surprises any more than my borrowers do.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to open it up for questions. Any questions about the financing process?
Do you work with buyers that have late payments?
Late payments on what though? Like what type of late payments? Like car payment, like previous
Sick
home?
couple, they have late payments on mortgage
Okay.
in the last year.
Okay. So, but how many late pays? And is it like one 30-day or multiple 90-day lates? Is it because
I think it's like how they're getting paid. So once they've get paid, then they pay their mortgage. So it may be like 3 or 4.
that's a problem? That's a
Mhm.
huge problem. And that's going to put them in what's known as non-QM territory. And when you're there, I mean, one of my very close personal friends I'm doing a mortgage for now, and it's not because he had lates or anything like that. It's just the way he has always done his income because he's self-employed. And I do a ton of self-employed borrowers. So if you guys have those difficult to fit people, I have access to a lot of products for that. But in this situation, they would need to go somewhere, someone with a lender or a broker that does non-QM.
QM?
Yeah. And there will be very, 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 very stiff guidelines that go along with that. You don't pay your mortgage when you can. Period. I mean, by the way, you're looking at somebody whose own father, and it's part of the reason why I got into the CRA side of this. My father was terrible with money. And he at one point owned, I think, 5 different properties. And because he was an artist and he injured himself, he couldn't work. Well, next thing you know, we're just foreclosure, 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 foreclosure. And because we come to find out later, because this is back when, oh, you got a social security number here, you can get a mortgage, and they didn't really check anything. So he was out there borrowing from Peter to pay Paul on repeat in multiple different ways. I mean, he was smart, but that little rope he had given himself ran out. So, one of the things I learned from that, plus all the hospital bills, is, man, pay the mortgage before you pay anything else. You don't pay the doctors, you don't pay any of the other stuff, you pay the mortgage.
I saw another question.
What are your thoughts on
I'm really conservative when it comes to money, and that's just because I've lived through some pretty rough financial issues. Like I said, I grew up poor, so liquid. But I think it's smart to have a good mix. It's never good to have everything all in one place. You got to have a wide variety happen. I've got a friend of mine that didn't grow up much like me, and now he's worth millions. And I think he's about 70-30. He's 70% in real estate and 30 in liquid. So I don't agree with that. I think it should be the other way around. But that's me. Everybody's different. But I do think that the more cash you can have on, I mean, cash is king. Cash is always going to be king. I mean, well, now, but you know, I mean, let's just call a spade a spade with everything that's going on the crypto side of the markets and cash and banks and what we're potentially looking at with the markets. I still say hold on to as much cash as you can, especially if, say, heaven forbid, we've got some kind of warfare happening where we can't get into our ATM, we can't get into our bank, we can't write a check because they can't verify that the cash is there. I mean,
Mhm.
and who the heck carries checks around anymore? You know, so it's. I always say try to keep at least $1,000 cash in your house. The rest, as much as you can, in savings and a high yield savings. Credit unions are your best friend. Seriously, because they'll protect you far more than what you'll find in an FDIC bank.
What do you think about folks like cashing out of stocks and things to purchase homes?
Or retirement.
Yeah, like what time? Yeah, 401ks. If they are.
I do not have a problem with somebody taking money out of their 401k because you're going to pay yourself back.
Mhm.
It takes one half a dozen of another. I think going into debt to buy a home on top of having a mortgage loan means that you should not be buying. And not everybody has the money. I mean, that's why DPA products are available.
When you
Why?
say debt, are you talking about when someone cashes a stock or,
No,
or I guess retirement, they have to hit a penalty or something? Is that what you're talking about?
not so much that, but say somebody, comes to you and they've got a balance on a credit card that's almost exactly the same amount that a down payment on a house is, and they've had it seasoned in the bank account for a while. I mean, people do it. We see it. And, 9 times out of 10, there's nothing we can do about it because it's already sat in that account for like 2-3 months. But that's also where me as a lender, I have to have that conversation with them where I have to say, hey, you do know there's HOA, you do know there are property taxes, you do know, by the way, if that escrow account goes up, it's not the mortgage that went up. It is the escrow account, and I see that a lot. And you're talking about TikTok earlier.
Mhm.
People who get on TikTok and talk about, oh, my mortgage payment went up. No, man, you didn't, and that's a conversation I have with all of my borrowers when they close. Hey, I send an email. It literally says, you're a homeowner. Now what?
Mhm.
And I walk through the whole part of property taxes. It's your responsibility.
And I think that's especially important in new construction because a lot of people don't realize that your your property taxes based on just land is not going to be the same thing as what it is when there is a home on the property. And now your property taxes have doubled and you're like, my mortgage went up, but it didn't.
So, as realtors, I'm going to tell you something that makes me absolutely never want to work with a realtor again. When I have a realtor convince a borrower, oh, just do it on the unimproved taxes, you are setting that borrower up for failure. In fact, I just closed on somebody last week who they lost their most recent home because of that very situation. They had a realtor, the whole nine. They went to buy a home. I think it was a David Weekley in Austin. They are living in the home, happy as they can be, not thinking, not knowing, even though they went to the closing, they signed the docs, that, oh, by the way, your property taxes were based on the lot value. Here's your new property tax bill. They had to turn around and sell that home almost immediately because they couldn't afford it. I mean, they were bought in Austin. Think about what's going on in Austin, especially in and around like Round Rock, Buda, all those little towns all around Austin. It's exploded. I personally, I will not close on unimproved taxes. Absolutely will not unless I have a borrower who begs me to do it. It's just a rule I've set. I calculate it.
Okay. Yeah.
Or my underwriter will. I will, And then if they can't afford it, I mean, because let's be real, sometimes you just can't afford to do that. But say for doctors and nurses are a perfect example. They know within the next 2 years their income is going to double, sometimes triple. Yeah, I'll probably do it for them, but they got to sign the no letter, and I'm going to do everything Andrea told me, and don't you dare come back at me. It's a bunch of the whole, hey, we're going to talk about this multiple times, and I'm going to have email after email backing me up so that you don't come back at me later and start yelling at me. What we get a lot of on my side is borrowers coming back and saying, you know, my lender didn't tell me about this. Okay, I can believe that, but you were still at that closing. I know I sound like a jerk when I say that, but you signed the papers at the closing table. As the borrower, you signed them. So, that's why it's a team effort. I feel when a mortgage loan is taking place, it's not just the seller's agent to share everything about the house. It's also that borrower's agent. It's their job too to explain things. Hey, get with your lender, ask about this, ask about this. And then it's the lender's job to answer those questions and to really inform the borrower.
Absolutely. You had a question?
Do you ever have borrowers qualify with cash value life insurance stuff, or they don't really need?
Very rare. It's very rare. I have done a few. Um, I found it more often it happened when it was, say, a jumbo borrower who had, a ton of life insurance, but it's very rare these days.
Other questions before we wrap? All right, let's give it a round of applause. Thank y'all so much for being here.